as for example, there was just, I think we're going to talk about this probably, but there was just this case about what sex you can mark on your passport, right?
Mhm.
And so the lower court said, okay, I haven't made a full final ruling, but looking at the situation, I think that the transgender plaintiffs are likely to win and they're going to suffer more harm. So I'm going to just stop this policy while I consider the case. So that moves up to the Supreme Court because the Trump administration says even pausing
It's an emergency.
is a huge emergency, and we have to, like, the Supreme Court has to come to our rescue. So it's basically like the Trump rescue docket now.
That's insane. People are putting the gender that they desire, that fits with their identity, on their passports. This is an emergency. You must stop this. That is wild. Let's just talk about that then. The Supreme Court handed him this, I guess, victory against trans people. And non-binary people. You have to now put your sex at birth on your passport. We know this is obviously in kind of the wake of all these stories of people, trans people and non-binary people, getting their passports taken from them or ripped up or issued new passports that give them a gender that is not their gender. And so, yeah, I mean, this is so petty and so insane and, in my opinion, so unconstitutional, but whatever. It's so discriminatory. They're also going to rule, the Supreme Court, on whether trans athletes can participate in sports, right? Whether the 14th Amendment protects them or not. Can you just give me your sense on, again, this is this pet issue of the right that they ran on, and now they're delivering for the bigots out there, in my opinion. What do you think about the trans athletes? And like, for me, I'm like, how in the hell are they going to justify this level of discrimination under the 14th Amendment, under Title IX? There's so many protections for trans athletes. Do they really want this fight on the Supreme Court level? But give me your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think really quickly, going back to the passport case, I do just want to touch on this because I think this case, it has so many elements of what is happening at this point between the Trump administration and the Supreme Court, which is that it has, like, it's a discriminatory policy, right? There's no sense to it besides discrimination because an identity document should reflect the identity that you see. Otherwise, it's confusing. The whole point of the document is that you can identify someone. If it says male, but you're presenting as female, that's confusing. And that leads to invasive searches and missing your flights and interrogations and real harms, right? Yes. There's like a real harm there. So also, emergency, right? This other issue. Oh, it's an emergency that we can't do this. Well, this has been the policy of the United States for 33 years. Right? Because it made sense. You want the document to reflect what the, customs agent or TSA or whoever is looking at you sees. Yeah. So it is just not an emergency. And secondly, the Trump administration can't really demonstrate that it's harmed, except in this sort of abstract way of, like, it's harmful that we don't get to do whatever we want exactly when we want. Right? And so the court basically says, like, one, we don't really think that harm to transgender people is real. We won't even consider that.
Yep.
Two, it's definitely an emergency, even though there's no evidence that's an emergency. And three, obviously this is discriminatory, but we're not even going to consider the fact that it's discriminatory. And so I think that these, like, three pieces are, like, just come up again and again and again, right? Which is, like, the only harms we're going to care about are, like, this sort of abstract harm to the president, and specifically this president. Yep. They didn't really act this way around Biden.
Nope. I mean, Biden didn't really require it, but he could have at the end there, but he didn't. But yeah.
Yeah. So I would say that I think for the athletes case, so this case hasn't been argued yet. So I haven't had the benefit of listening to them during oral arguments. But this court is really on a roll when it comes to rolling back LGBTQ rights and particularly trans rights. I mean, I think several of the justices just don't even seem to really feel like transgender people exist, that
Yep.
it's a real thing.
Yep.
That this is right. And so they're just, I don't know how they're going to justify it. I mean, maybe, the real discrimination is against the girls who might lose.
Exactly.
Right?
The
Like maybe
Riley
that's
Gaines
the
who
real
will
discrimination here.
tie for fifth or whatever the hell. I mean, yeah, I mean, and I think because of, I mean, the passport stuff is like the beginning, and it obviously starts. This is not small, but it starts seemingly small. And again, we've sort of talked about the way that the rolling back of rights for trans people is a permission structure to roll back rights for all people. And I think that, based on what you just said, yeah, the right and the Christian nationalists and those in the Supreme Court don't believe that trans people should exist, and this is sort of their way of eliminating them legally, eliminating them as a concept, as an idea. And it's like, no, you should go back into the shadows. We don't recognize you. We don't think you should exist. And these are people who like believe in conversion therapy and shit like that.
Well, and there is literally a case about conversion therapy in front of the justices, and it looks like they're going to say, go ahead, do conversion therapy. That case was already argued in October, and
they have not decided, but it
hasn't been
sounds like
decided, no. But my reading of that is that they are going to overturn state laws that restrict conversion therapy for, I think, specifically for minors, and tell therapists that they can go ahead, at least in.
But they're anti-child. I mean, this is the right
talk therapy.
I mean, this is just amazing. Like, this is the right that, like, protect children. Please send them to camps or, with people who will make them feel awful and probably victimize them for who they are. Sticking on LGBTQ plus rights, there was sort of a win, which was Supreme Court not hearing an appeal from Kim Davis to try to revisit same-sex marriage again. The Kentucky county clerk who refused to, well, number one, ever get a glow up or change her hair, but also refused to, certify a same-sex marriage. And now she has to pay $360,000 in damages to one of the couples, which is amazing. But just maybe that was good. Good. They didn't revisit same-sex marriage. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that even though this court is on, like I said, like a strong trajectory of rolling back LGBTQ rights, and particularly rights for trans people, this was not a good case for them. I think that, to be honest, like legal observers who were watching this case just never thought that the justices were going to take it. And the reasons are kind of complicated. The case didn't come in like a direct posture about Obergefell, and there were questions about like her ability to bring this up. And so it was just not a good, like what the nerds refer to as like a vehicle, right?
Sure.
For this. So I wouldn't say that like these justices are never going to reconsider Obergefell. I think it was like if they want to do it, this is not the case they want to do it. And I would say because that was such a recent landmark, like they probably don't want to get to it right now. I think that there are other ways that they can sort of chip away at LGBTQ rights. And if that is building toward ultimately repealing Obergefell or not, there are ways that they can make sure that LGBTQ people are second-class citizens, even if they can get married.
Well, and one of those things I was going to ask you about, because I'd forgotten, that they ruled 2 years ago that effectively a web designer who was asked, who again was basically like an astroturf case, as many of these cases are, like a anti-gay astroturf case, but a web designer who wasn't really a web designer, who was asked but wasn't really asked to make a website for a same-sex couple, a wedding. They ruled in her favor that she could discriminate against not having to make this website for the same-sex couple. And so it's like there's a little bit of a line there in terms of like, okay, they're giving the right for, I don't know, you can tell me, like a private business to discriminate. It's legal if you're a business, not legal if you're, the county clerk who is being asked to perform, or to certify a marriage. But yeah, I mean, that in terms of the chipping away at, but maybe, I don't know, give me your sense. Is that
Yeah,
seem,
and it's chipping away, and it's a big chip. Like
yeah,
that case is called 303 Creative. It is a really big chip to be able to say someone can walk into a store and they can be refused service, right?
yep,
I mean, that's just, we live our lives assuming that if we walk into a store, we can get a meal or a picture or whatever like the service is, right? And so there were like caveats about it. Like they didn't explicitly say like this also like applies to like racial minorities if,
right.
or this, this applies to literally every single business, right? So there, in that way, it was also like a chip because there are other pieces of this that are sort of like question marks now. But logically, there's really no way to cabin this off from the idea that business owners can simply say, like, it is my free speech to say that I do not endorse interracial couples. So interracial couples can't like buy my goods, right?
Yep.
I mean, there's no like logical point where like 303 Creative ends and that kind of discrimination begins. So it is basically, in the 1960s, part of the Civil Rights Act was like, right? Like you don't have to, Black people don't have to sleep in their car when they're traveling because hotels have to serve them,
Yep.
right? They don't have to like starve on a road trip because like restaurants have to serve them, right?
Yeah.
Like this is like public accommodations laws are just basic civil rights laws to make sure that we are all equal citizens in this country. And that's what they're chipping away at.
What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/bitchuation room. Do it.